Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are officially picking up with the Maestro miniseries. It's a 5-issue miniseries, and I still say that they're going to put Maestro in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And there's one particular reason why I think this solidifies it more than anything, but I believe they're going to put Maestro in the MCU. So what we end up doing here, and we'll have a bit of a discussion towards the end of this about Maestro himself, but one thing I do want to say to you guys as we get into this is I do want to say thank you guys, right? The response to the Twitch stream has been awesome. I think we capped out at around 320 people. Right now we've been sitting steady at about 120, 130 for the last 2 days straight. I think we've given away something like 12 or 13 Rob Core rings. We're giving away a handful of trade paperbacks. So if you guys want to be a part of that, go check it out. Twitch.tv/comicsexplained. You'll find the link down in the description. And right now I think we're covering the full story videos. And I believe here in the next few hours, we'll be covering the Incredible Hulk, right? So kind of good timing for this particular comic. But what this does is this initially opens up with Professor Hulk. Right now, the reason why this matters is twofold. One, because Peter David's the one writing this Maestro miniseries, which is perfect because he's the one that made the character. And two, because Professor Hulk is the one who originally fought Maestro, right, from back in the old Future Imperfect stories. And so Professor Hulk was basically the merged Hulk, right? It's where Bruce Banner ended up coming face to face with all his different alternate reality Hulk personas and basically kind of merged into them. And that led him to essentially have the intelligence of Bruce with all the power of the Incredible Hulk. And so what this does is it's after these Sentinels are destroyed and they're more or less taken out, you then pick up with the fact that they're basically the Avengers here, right? Like and it really looks more like the new Avengers than anything else. But you've basically got, like, you know, Wolverine who's here, you've got Thor who's there, he flies off, and then you're met with Betty Ross. And that's our first cue to the fact that something seems a little strange here, because Betty Ross was part of Bruce Banner's or part of Professor Hulk's life, but things get a little more interesting, right? Because it's kind of like nothing could possibly go wrong in this location, right? And when we transition into what looks like Avengers Mansion, you've got the Incredible Hulk, and then you've got Betty, and then they have 2 kids. And Hulk and Betty never had kids, as far as I'm aware of, right? They didn't have like any children or anything, you know. And it's kind of nuts because one of these things that this sort of happens is, you know, Betty Ross calls her kids to sit back down, and they say, no, we don't have to. And the question's like, why? And it's like, because you're dead. And that's what Hulk's kind of like, what in the world is going on here? And one of his kids is like, they're dead. Like, everybody's dead. Betty Ross is dead. Everybody's basically gone. And then Betty Ross starts operating like a computer program, right? You know, HTTP error 404, right? The file name can't be found, bad command file, you know, all that kind of stuff. She's operating like a computer program that's going awry, and Hulk kind of starts to freak out. And what it does is everything sort of goes black, and then it leads to the arrival of Captain America, and then everything kind of comes back on again. And it's one of these things where Captain America's like, okay, hang on a second, the system's kind of, you know, everything seems to be going awry for a minute. Mysterio's in your mind, right? And that's the knee-jerk explanation, that Mysterio is manipulating the Incredible Hulk. He's manipulating Bruce Banner. This is one of the first reasons why I say that I think they're going to put Maestro in the MCU, because we already know who Mysterio is, right? So what better character to reference? At that point, they could have used any high-level telepath, right? They could have said like Emma Frost is in your head, or like Quentin Quire is in your head. And comic book fans would, for the most part, know who they are. But if you're not a comic book fan, if you're somebody who's reading this, or somebody who's stumbling into comics, or you pick this up after Maestro's introduced, then you don't know who Quentin Quire is, but you do know who Mysterio is, right? So it kind of makes sense. But it's one of these things where Hulk sort of rejects it, and he's like, no, that's not the case. You know, when did Mysterio become so powerful that he could get into my head? And even if he was capable of doing that, why? What would be the purpose of Mysterio messing with my mind, right? Now, for us as readers, the knee-jerk reaction is Old Man Logan, right? The villains are basically conquering the world, and they got Hulk out of the way by manipulating his mind and basically keeping him distracted. But that's not true. Instead, what ends up happening is he basically leaves the room, and then he ends up in what looks like this giant facility. And then from there, it's kind of like, okay, if this is really what Mysterio's doing, then it's a whole new kettle of beans. But then everything shifts up again, and you're suddenly met with Black Widow. And this is why I say I think they're going to put Maestro in the MCU, because when Black Widow approaches the Hulk, she says, the sun's getting real low. That's an MCU line. That's not a Marvel Comics line. Plus, it looks like Black Widow from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's kind of why. Now, it could just be that Marvel Comics is playing on that in order to make this transition easier for people coming from the movies getting into the comics, but I would say it's the other way around. I would say that basically you're going to see the Maestro rolled into the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But initially, Thor tries to stop Hulk, and he's like, no, like, you're not going to stop me. If you want to get in the way of this, that's fine. But then you basically end up having, like, you know, the Avengers turning on Hulk, trying to subdue him, and then of course him using his sonic clap that brings them all down, except for the Vision. And once the Vision approaches him, the Vision reaches into his brain and then essentially does something, right? In what appears to be more or less killing the Hulk. And then he suddenly wakes up in this massive facility. And this is really representative and really similar to like the Weapon X facility, right? The facility that was used to transform Wolverine into Weapon X, where he was reprogrammed, his memories were replaced, all that kind of stuff that he eventually broke out of. That's very similar to what this looks like. But once he breaks out, then suddenly he's met by what looks like this kind of computerized woman, more or less, and this young kid. And he immediately thinks this kid's a son, right? This is immediate reaction, and he thinks they took his son, right? Because for the most part, he's still kind of in a state of mental chaos. He doesn't fully know what's going on. And for him, this illusion might as well be as real as the previous illusion, right? So he's not really sure what's real and what's not anymore, which is really one of the benefits. If it were Mysterio, that's one of the benefits of Mysterio, is even when you snap back to reality, at that point, you don't know what's real and what's not, right? It's kind of a crazy situation. It's like Inception. And so ultimately, once you end up having this kid who basically panics and starts to make sounds like he is being attacked more or less by Hulk, he puts him down, the kid runs to his mom, and that's when Hulk starts to realize, okay, I'm actually here in the real world, but if I am, then what in the world is going on? And then suddenly, he's met by soldiers from Advanced Idea Mechanics. Now, immediately, Hulk goes on the offensive. And the reason why is that for those of you guys who are new to Marvel Comics, Advanced Idea Mechanics was the scientific arm of Hydra for a long, long time until Hydra fell and then they broke off and started doing their own thing. But Advanced Idea Mechanics looks to take over the world through technological means, right? Through scientific means. And so they're always looking for ways to basically improve themselves or to attain some sort of weapon they can use to achieve their goal of like world dominance. And the Hulk is a perfect way to do that. You're just talking about a massive guy. And if he can be controlled, and if he can be made to go on certain attacks and then pulled off from those attacks and sent to other attacks, literally turn into what is more or less a living weapon, then you'd be one of the most powerful forces in all of the world, if not the most powerful, save for somebody like Doctor Strange or somebody like that. But most countries wouldn't really be able to stand against you. And so realizing that this is Advanced Idea Mechanics and realizing it's their soldiers, they initially tell him, if you don't back off, we're going to shoot you. And Hulk kind of starts to call their bluff, right? In the sense that like, it is Advanced Idea Mechanics. As far as the Hulk is aware, he's never really had anything to fear from Advanced Idea Mechanics. He never had to worry about them. They never really had weapons that were really powerful enough to completely and totally subdue the Hulk, right? He'd always be able to find a way around them. But when they fire these guns, they're wildly advanced. And while they don't necessarily kill the Hulk, they do pack one heck of a punch. But this gives them the opportunity to smash a hole in the ground and to basically get away, only to discover that underneath him are all these different tanks, where you have people like Abomination who were kept in a state of suspended animation, right? And so it's kind of like, okay, they have more of me, what's going on? And that kind of leads to the question, are they weaponizing Hulks? Are they somehow trying to extract gamma radiation from us and create their own Hulk? Like, what's the whole purpose here? What's happening? And so where you end up having Hulk who runs at these soldiers who have now arrived from Advanced Idea Mechanics and hits a force field, suddenly he's shot by, this kind of laser that comes out of nowhere, and it's revealed to be MODOK, right? Now, MODOK was the last person I expected to see here, but MODOK, of course, is hardcore comic book readers will know, basically stands for mental organism designed only for killing. He's more or less a person who was converted into kind of like a machine type thing. He's just a murderous robot, right? He killed his creators and then went on his own thing, and you really haven't seen him for a long time in Marvel Comics, right? He was really more of like a 70s and 80s villain, really, if I had to be honest. I'm really more of an 80s villain, but MODOK first appeared in Tales of Suspense number 93, I think it was, back in 1967, and he was originally part of Advanced Idea Mechanics when they first created the Cosmic Cube. The issue here was Advanced Idea Mechanics wasn't entirely sure of what they'd done, and so the idea was to create an organism or to basically create something that could essentially probe the Cosmic Cube. And so they came up with what was called the MODOK project, right? Mental organism designed only for computing. And the idea was that they would send send MODOK basically into the Cosmic Cube, or at least have him probe the Cosmic Cube to see what it was truly capable of. The issue with this is that once George Tarleton, which was his name before he became MODOK, once he was forced into this system, had his mind enhanced and then came out, was thrown into the Doomsday chair, which is what he's on right now, you ended up finding out that basically he came to the realization he could overpower Advanced Idea Mechanics, and then he started setting his sights on world domination. Ultimately, he was defeated. We kind of saw him pop up, try to conquer the world, defeated again, that sort of a thing. But that's really where he's been ever since. He's just kind of been like a free-floating villain that's had a couple cool stories here and there, but he's by no means one of the most significant threats out there. Now, the idea that I imagine in the MCU, because they're going to bring MODOK in, the idea behind the MCU, I imagine, is that the scientific arm of Hydra, as we saw it during the events of like Captain America the Winter Soldier, is that it is going to go forward, and you're going to have AIM that comes out of that, and then you're going to have the creation of MODOK, if it wasn't made already, already when Hydra was in charge of S.H.I.E.L.D. But regardless, the Hulk basically starts to freak out and believes that MODOK is the one behind all this and goes to attack him and actually asks the question, what did you do? And MODOK's response is, I didn't do anything. I could have kept you back in that force field if I wanted to, but I let you attack me as a show that I'm not the threat here. I'm not the one who's trying to hurt you. And in fact, if you killed me, that would be fine, because this life I'm living is a fate worse than death. And not even because I'm strapped in this doomsday chair, but because we're stuck down here in what is more or less a gigantic bunker. And the Hulk asks, like, what are you talking about? And MODOK says, like, we're here because of the end of the world, right? We're here because the world's dead. Like, there's really nothing up there anymore. And when the Hulk asked, who did this? Was it like Hydra or something like that? What happened with this? MODOK's response is, they. It was just average Joes up there that did it. And you end up finding out that what had happened is at some point in the past, and the only real timeline we're given here is about 100 years ago. And we're only told that because the Incredible Hulk, when he first sees MODOK, says he looks like he's aged by 100 years. And that's really the only time frame we get. And what we end up finding out here is that at some point, some extremist group got their hands on 2 nuclear bombs. They detonated one in the United States and they detonated the other in Moscow, Russia. And what they did is they in turn used the computer systems of both of these countries to basically lead the other to believe that the other one attacked. So where the White House and the Capitol was obliterated through a nuclear bomb, which was detonated by these extremists, that the United States government was tricked into believing it was Russia and vice versa. And so ultimately this basically led to a nuclear strike. Basically what this seems to indicate is that it led to MAD, right? Mutually assured destruction. That it was a nuclear war that happened, World War III. And in all of this, 60% of humanity was basically destroyed. But what you end up having is that this extremist group ended up rising and calling themselves the Black Scythe, kind of, modeling themselves after the Grim Reaper. And they had come to the opinion that humanity, for the most part, had outlived its place on the earth, right? That humanity was more or less like a virus or a plague that was spreading around the earth and making things worse. And so their idea was to basically rid the earth of humanity. And so where all you had left was about 40% of humanity, and a lot of those individuals were dying from radiation sickness, Scythe ended up showing up into like major tourist areas and major metropolitan areas and releasing a virus that in turn infected the rest of the world. And that's how, for the most part, most of humanity fell. Now I say most because we're familiar with the history of Maestro and we're familiar with the kingdom of dystopia. So we know that not everybody on Earth died, but a huge percentage, something like 90% of humanity was killed between the viruses and between the nuclear strike. Now, this is where things get a little interesting, and in fact, it's actually Peter David building on his own story. Because originally, we weren't told that there was a virus that was released. We were simply just told it was a nuclear war that took place between all the various nations that were out there, and it basically led to the collapse of pretty much all of humanity. But as the Incredible Hulk leaves, right, as he's allowed to leave by MODOK and these guys to get out there and actually see what's there, because the Hulk needs to see for himself so he knows what's really going on, that he kind of makes this comment to himself: if it really was a nuclear war, why didn't the superheroes stop it? And then he answers his own question and says, probably because they didn't, right? Like, you have mass shootings, the superheroes don't really care about that. They focus on the Red Skull. The superheroes could have stopped Chernobyl, but they didn't. The superheroes could have stopped the fall of the Twin Towers, but they didn't, right? Like, there's all these major calamities that the superheroes could have stopped, but they didn't, for one reason or another. And so sure, it makes sense that if World War III was going to happen, by the time it started, there was nothing the superheroes could do. And so once we actually get out there into Los Angeles, which this bunker is located below, but once we actually get out into the city of LA, that is completely and totally decimated. And it really gives credence to the idea that it was a nuclear holocaust that happened throughout the entirety of the world as a result of the conflict between Russia and the United States. And that seemingly this virus seems to also have had an impact. We don't really know what the impact of this virus is. We haven't gotten to it yet, but basically, yeah. And it's one of these things where the Incredible Hulk's kind of like, I mean, even if the superheroes wanted to do anything, there really isn't anything they could do, right? Like, you can't save a world that's destined to destroy itself. In the Hulk's mind, it was only a matter of time before something like this happened. It was only a matter of time before humanity used its vaunted freedom, the thing it loves so much, to wipe itself out. But ultimately, the Incredible Hulk's just kind of like, yeah, I guess it's true. Like, I guess it really is true that this is exactly what happened. They really did destroy themselves. And so where he ends up going to the Hollywood sign and MODOK meets with him and asks him, why did you come here? He says, like, is this the only thing left? Is this it? Is this bunker that we have down here with advanced idea mechanics, is this it? Is this all that's left? And the response of MODOK is, if you go out there, it'll just be more of the same. Like, that's really all you're going to find. There really doesn't seem to be anything else out there. Now, we don't really know how MODOK knows this, or if he even knows it at all, right? We can kind of assume that MODOK knows this because of the fact that advanced idea mechanics use their technology to survey the world, right? Because we have to assume that, like, on some level, satellites are still functioning. And advanced idea Mechanics has their own satellites and has had them for a very long time. And so even if it only contains simple satellite imagery, they could literally tap into them and just sort of canvas the world. And that's when MODOK really kind of comes in and says, like, come back with us. There's a reason why Captain America's not down here, or Black Widow, or any of those guys, because there was no future to save. What we needed were people who could survive radiation poisoning, people like you, like the Incredible Hulk, who can cope with gamma radiation. We had you in the state of suspended animation so that when the time came when we went back to the surface, we could wake you up and we could acclimate you to the world as it exists right now, and hopefully you wouldn't go on the kind of rampage that you did, but at the very least, we could get things back to a state of normalcy. We could try to rebuild. And ultimately, the Incredible Hulk's response is, no, I don't want to be a part of that process. I'm going to go out there like, I don't need friends, right? Friends die. You know, like, stop calling me Dr. Banner. My name is not Dr. Banner anymore. And he simply just kind of refers to himself as the Hulk. And when MODOK asks, is that who you are now? Like, are you just the Hulk? The response of the Hulk himself is, for now, but we'll end up seeing what the future brings, right? So this is the first issue, guys. It's exciting. The next issue comes out at the end of September, right? So it's a monthly series. But if you guys are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Oh, wait a minute. There's one thing we've been missing from our outro, and we need to bring this back. Okay. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you all later. Peace.